Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a place where you can be comfortable and undisturbed. Let your body settle, your shoulders relax, your breathing become soft and natural. There is no goal here except to be present. Let the sounds around you simply come and go, like clouds passing through a vast, open sky. For the next while, there is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to do. Just here. Just now. Welcome. The Buddha taught that the root of our deepest peace is found not in changing the world around us, but in understanding the nature of the world within us. We spend our lives running on a path, chasing after things we believe will bring us happiness, running away from things we fear will bring us pain. But the path itself, the very ground beneath our feet in this present moment, is where our true home resides. We are like a person searching for their glasses everywhere, not realizing they are already perched on their own head. The clarity we seek is already here, waiting to be noticed. The wisdom of Buddhism is not a distant philosophy, but a practical map for coming home to yourself. It's about learning to sit in the center of your own life, with all its chaos and beauty, and finding an unshakable stillness there. Tonight, we will explore this homecoming through stories and reflections. Let this be a gentle journey, not a strenuous effort. Allow the words to wash over you, to sink in where they may. There is no test at the end. Only a gentle invitation to wake up to the life you are already living. Let me begin with a story from my own early days of seeking. Long before I found the quiet of the monastery, I was a restless young man, convinced that meaning was something to be earned through struggle and achievement. I pushed myself relentlessly, believing peace was a trophy for the weary, waiting at some distant finish line. One autumn, I took a solitary hike high into the mountains, driven by a vague notion that the answer might be found in solitude and height. After hours of steep climbing, I reached a windswept ridge. The view was breathtaking, endless peaks fading into blue haze. I sat on a cold rock, waiting. Waiting for a profound feeling, for an insight to strike me, for the peace I'd been chasing to finally settle upon my shoulders like a cloak. Instead, I just felt tired, cold, and strangely empty. The vastness of the landscape only magnified my own smallness. I had reached a physical peak, but internally, I felt no different. As I sat there in disappointment, a simple, weary thought arose: I can't do this anymore. I can't keep climbing mountains looking for something that isn't here. And in the quiet surrender of that thought, something shifted. I stopped looking at the distant peaks. My gaze fell to a small, resilient wildflower growing from a crack in the very rock I sat on. It was a tiny, purple bloom, trembling in the wind, utterly fragile and yet completely present. It wasn't trying to be anywhere else. It wasn't comparing itself to the trees in the valley or the clouds above. It was simply being a flower, right here, right now, in impossible circumstances. In that moment, I understood something that no amount of striving had ever shown me. I had been searching for a grand, mountaintop experience, while ignoring the miraculous, ordinary presence of life happening right under my nose, the feel of the rock, the sound of the wind, the tenacious beauty of a single flower. I had been so focused on the destination that I had missed the entire journey. The peace wasn't at the top of the mountain. It was in the act of truly sitting down, of giving up the search, and finally noticing what had been there all along. I descended the mountain a different man. I hadn't found what I was looking for. I had lost the desperate need to look. That was the beginning. This is the first, gentle nudge. Your life is not a problem to be solved. It is an experience to be lived. And you can only live it when you stop running from this moment, or toward the next one. Happiness isn't the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It is the quality of your attention as you walk the road, rain or shine. If this way of seeing things resonates with you, I gently invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. By joining our community, you create a little sanctuary in your daily routine, a reminder to pause and come home to the present. Your subscription is a quiet signal that supports this space of peace, allowing us to share these moments of clarity with you and others who are walking a similar path. Now, let's continue our walk together. Let's speak of a fundamental Buddhist principle, impermanence, or anicca. Everything that is born, changes. Everything that comes together, falls apart. The seasons turn. The day becomes night. Joy arises and fades. Sorrow wells up and subsides. We often hear this as a somber truth, a source of anxiety. We clutch at pleasant moments, trying to freeze them, and we resist unpleasant ones, trying to push them away. But in this clutching and resisting, we suffer. The teaching of impermanence, when fully embraced, is not a doctrine of despair, but the key to profound freedom and appreciation. Imagine you are watching a magnificent sunset. The sky is a riot of orange, purple, and gold. Its beauty is undeniable, and it moves you. But part of its beauty, its poignancy, lies in the certain knowledge that it is fading even as you watch it. You cannot hold it. You cannot tell the sun to stop. That very transience is what makes it precious. If the sunset were to freeze permanently, it would cease to be a sunset, it would become a painting, a static thing, and eventually, you might not even see it anymore. It is the flowing, changing nature of the experience that gives it life. Now, apply this to your own life. The difficult meeting at work, the argument with a loved one, the anxiety about tomorrow, these are all like weather patterns in the sky of your mind. They feel solid, permanent, all-consuming in the moment. But they are not. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are passing through. Knowing this doesn't always make them pleasant, but it can give you the spaciousness to not be completely identified with them. You can say to yourself, this is a storm. Storms, by their nature, do not last forever. I will tend to myself while it rains, and trust that clear skies will return. Here is an original story about a woman named Anya, who learned to dance with impermanence. Anya was a conservator of ancient textiles. Her life's work was to preserve fragile tapestries and garments, to arrest their decay, to freeze them in time. She worked in a silent, climate-controlled room, and she took immense pride in halting the inevitable. She saw decay as the enemy. At home, she applied the same principle. She tried to keep her children perpetually young in her heart, she resisted any change to her routines, and she became deeply anxious about aging, loss, and the passage of time. Then, a fire broke out in a secondary storage area of her museum. While her main workroom was spared, the fire suppression system drenched everything. A 17th-century silk tapestry she had spent 2 years painstakingly restoring was soaked. The delicate dyes ran. The fabric puckered and warped. In her eyes, it was ruined. The thing she had fought so hard to preserve was gone. Devastated, she was forced to take the tapestry out of its controlled environment to dry. She laid it on a table in a sunlit atrium, a place she would have never allowed it to be. For days, she would come and sit with it, not to work, but simply to be with the loss. As it dried, something unexpected happened. The running dyes created new, subtle watercolor effects. The puckering gave the fabric a three-dimensional, textured quality. The subject, a garden scene, now looked as if it were viewed through rain or morning mist. It was different. It was not what it was. But it was, in a way, breathtakingly beautiful. It told a new story, a story of survival, of transformation, of an encounter with chaos. A visiting curator saw it and was not horrified, but fascinated. "It's alive," he whispered. "Most of these pieces feel like ghosts. This one feels like it's still breathing. It has a history now, not just a provenance." Anya's world turned upside down. She had devoted her life to fighting impermanence, and here was its undeniable, beautiful handiwork. She began to see her life differently. Her children growing up wasn't a loss to be prevented, but a miracle to be witnessed. The lines on her own face weren't decay, but the watercolor strokes of her own lived experience. She didn't abandon her work, but her relationship to it changed. She became less of a preserver and more of a compassionate companion to these objects, honoring their journey through time rather than trying to imprison them in a moment. She learned that peace isn't found in stopping the river of life. It's found in letting go of the riverbank, trusting the current, and appreciating the ever-changing view. Let's continue. We often carry a deep-seated belief that our worth, our happiness, is conditional. It depends on our success, on others' opinions, on the circumstances of our lives. We hand the keys to our inner peace over to the world outside, and then we feel helpless when that world, as it inevitably does, changes. The Buddha pointed to a radical alternative, that true peace is unconditional. It is not caused by external events, it is the nature of a mind that is no longer at war with what is. This is the principle of non-attachment. Not detachment, as in cold indifference, but non-attachment, the ability to engage fully with life without being shackled by it. Think of it like this. You can enjoy a beautiful piece of music on the radio. You can be moved by it, tap your foot to the rhythm, feel it stir your soul. But if the station fades into static, or the song ends, you don't fall apart. You don't clutch the radio and scream for the song to return. You might feel a hint of disappointment, but then you simply listen to the next sound, or you sit in the silence. Your well-being wasn't dependent on that one song. You enjoyed it while it lasted, and you let it go when it was over. Non-attachment is bringing that same graceful relationship to everything in your life, to possessions, to roles, to relationships, to your own thoughts and feelings. Attachment whispers, "I need this to be exactly this way for me to be okay." Non-attachment knows, "I am okay, regardless of the way things are." This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care from a place of fullness, not from a place of lack. Your love becomes a gift, not a demand. Let me share a story about a man named Leo, a master carpenter. Leo was known for his flawless craftsmanship. His furniture was not just built, it was sculpted. He poured his identity into every joint, every sanded curve. His masterpiece was a dining table made from a single, ancient walnut slab. It was his pride, his signature to the world. He would never sell it. It sat in his workshop, a testament to his skill. One winter, a pipe burst in his workshop ceiling. Water poured down for hours before it was discovered, directly onto the walnut table. The wood swelled. The joint strained and opened. The finish was ruined. When Leo saw it, he felt a physical pain in his chest. It wasn't just a damaged table. It felt like a part of his own soul had been cracked open. For weeks, he couldn't enter the workshop. He was paralyzed by the loss. Finally, his granddaughter, a young artist with paint-stained hands, came to visit. She saw the table, ran her fingers over the warped grain, and said, "Grandpa, it looks like a landscape now. Like little hills and valleys." Her words bypassed his grief and touched his craftsman's curiosity. Reluctantly, he approached the table. He saw what she saw. The water damage had created a unique, rippling topography in the wood. Instead of seeing ruin, he began to see potential. He stopped seeing his ruined masterpiece and started seeing the wood's new story. He decided not to restore it to its original state. Instead, he worked with the damage. He filled the cracks with a glowing gold resin, making the cracks look like rivers of light. He sanded the warped areas into gentle, organic curves. He didn't hide the disaster, he integrated it. When he was finished, the table was more stunning than before. It wasn't just a testament to skill anymore, it was a testament to resilience, to adaptation, to the beauty that can emerge when we stop fighting what is and start creating with it. Leo's attachment to the table as a symbol of his perfect skill had caused him immense suffering. His non-attachment, his willingness to let that old identity go and engage with the reality of the damaged wood, led to a new, deeper kind of creation. He learned that his worth as a craftsman wasn't in preserving a perfect past, but in his responsive, creative relationship with the ever-unfolding present. This leads us to another profound teaching, the concept of anatta, often translated as non-self. This is a subtle and often misunderstood point. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means that what you typically call me is not a solid, unchanging, independent entity. It is a flowing, interdependent process. Think of a wave in the ocean. The wave has a distinct form, a unique character. It rises, it crests, it falls. It is real. But is it separate from the ocean? Can you point to where the wave ends and the ocean begins? The wave is a temporary expression of the ocean itself. Its substance is water, its form is constantly changing. You are like that wave, a beautiful, temporary expression of a vast, interconnected life. Your body, your thoughts, your memories, your personality. These are the ever-changing forms. The awareness that knows these forms, that spacious consciousness in which they arise and pass, is more like the ocean. Why is this liberating? Because it means you are not the limited story you've been telling yourself. You are not just the anxious one, the successful one, the one who was hurt, the one who always fails. These are passing waves in the ocean of your being. When you identify less with the temporary waves and rest more in the aware ocean, you find a stability that no wave can disturb. Consider the tale of the actor. Maya was a stage actress of immense talent. She was so good that she would disappear into her roles. On stage, she was the tragic queen, the witty heroine, the vengeful spirit. The problem began when the curtain fell. She found it harder and harder to come back. She would carry the emotional weight of her characters home. If she played a heartbroken woman, she'd feel a vague sadness for days. If she played a villain, she'd find herself irritable and suspicious. She began to feel she had no core self, just a collection of borrowed masks. She felt hollow, lost. In desperation, she took a sabbatical and went on a silent retreat. For the first week, the silence was agony. The characters in her head had no lines to speak, but they still jostled for attention, bits of monologues, emotional echoes. She felt more fragmented than ever. One afternoon, during a walking meditation, a simple instruction was given: just feel the soles of your feet touching the earth. Nothing else. Over and over, as her mind wandered into dramatic pasts or imagined futures, she returned to the simple, solid, undramatic feeling of her feet on the ground. Touch. Pressure. Release. Touch. Pressure. Release. A strange thing began to happen. As she anchored in this simple, physical sensation, the noisy characters in her mind began to lose their urgency. They didn't vanish, but they became like background noise, like actors mumbling in the wings while the stage was occupied by the quiet, profound act of walking. She wasn't the queen, the heroine, or the spirit. She wasn't even Maya the actress. She was the awareness feeling the feet. She was the silence listening to the thoughts. She was the space in which the entire drama of her identity was performing. For the first time in her adult life, she felt a deep, quiet sense of being. It had no character, no lines, no costume. It just was. When she returned to the stage, her craft transformed. She could still embody characters with breathtaking depth, but now she did it from this place of spacious awareness. She could play the heartbreak without becoming it, because she knew she was the ocean, not the stormy wave. Her performances became even more powerful, infused with a new layer of compassionate truth. She had found the one role that never ends, the one self that is no self, the conscious presence behind all experience. We've touched on being present, on impermanence, on non-attachment. Let's now speak of a practice that weaves these together: mindfulness. Mindfulness is the gentle, sustained effort to return your attention to the present moment, again and again, without judgment. It is the training of the mind to inhabit your actual life. You don't need a special cushion or a quiet room to begin. You can start right now. Just notice the next breath as it enters your body. Don't try to control it. Just feel it. The coolness of the inhale. The slight pause. The warmth of the exhale. Your mind will wander instantly, to a memory, a plan, a sound. This is not failure. This is the moment of practice. When you notice it has wandered, gently, kindly, escort it back to the breath. No scolding. Just a soft return. That moment of noticing and returning is a moment of awakening. It is a small, powerful act of saying, I choose to be here, now. Every mundane activity can become a practice in mindfulness. Washing a dish. Feel the temperature of the water, the slipperiness of the soap, the shape of the plate. Driving. See the colors of the cars, feel the vibration of the wheel, notice the play of light and shadow. In these ordinary moments, you are not just doing a chore or commuting, you are reclaiming your life from the autopilot of thought and worry. You are coming alive. A short story about a bus driver named Ben. Ben's route was the same, day in, day out. The same streets, the same stops, the same traffic jams. He drove on autopilot, his mind a million miles away. Worrying about bills, replaying arguments, dreaming of vacations. His job felt like a prison sentence, a meaningless interval between home and home. One rainy Tuesday, stuck in yet another gridlock, he heard a snippet of a radio talk about paying attention. The speaker said, "The only thing you ever really have is this moment. Why wish it away?" It irked him. Easy for you to say, he thought. You're not stuck in this tin can. But the phrase stuck. Out of sheer boredom and irritation, he decided to try it. Just for this one red light. He stopped trying to get through the light and decided to just be at the light. He noticed the rhythmic swipe of the wipers. He watched the raindrops merge and slide down the windshield. He saw the splash of color from a neon sign reflected on the wet street. He felt the idle vibration of the engine. For those 30 seconds, he wasn't a frustrated driver, he was a man noticing rain. The light turned green. The moment passed. But something had changed. The tight coil of frustration in his gut was a little looser. He tried it at the next stop, really looking at the person who got on, the pattern on their umbrella, the way they shook off the rain. He heard the whoosh of the doors closing as a sound, not just a signal to go. Ben began to practice this deliberately. One bus stop at a time. One breath at a time. His route didn't change. The traffic didn't magically disappear. But his experience of it transformed utterly. He began to see beauty in the ordinary, the morning sun hitting a brick wall, the laughter of a group of schoolchildren, the weary smile of a regular commuter. His job was no longer a prison. It became a moving meditation, a daily pilgrimage through the heart of the city. He found a profound sense of peace, not by escaping his life, but by finally showing up for it. Let's continue. One of the most powerful forces shaping our suffering is our resistance to what is. We meet an unpleasant feeling, sadness, anger, fear, and our immediate, unconscious reaction is to tense up, to reject it, to want it gone. We say to ourselves, "I shouldn't feel this way." This resistance is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes constant, exhausting effort, and the moment you relax your grip, it bursts back to the surface with even more force. The Buddha's way invites a different relationship, acceptance. Not resignation, not approval, but a simple, courageous allowing of reality to be as it is in this moment. This acceptance is the ground from which intelligent change can actually grow. Imagine you are walking in the woods and you come to a wide, rushing stream, blocking your path. You have two options. You can stand on the bank, yelling at the stream, "You shouldn't be here. Go away. This isn't fair." This is resistance. It changes nothing about the stream, it only drains your energy and fills you with frustration. Or, you can accept the reality, there is a stream here. From that clear-eyed acceptance, you can then look for a way across, a fallen log, stepping stones, a place to ford. Acceptance gives you back your power to respond wisely. The same is true for inner experiences. When you feel a knot of anxiety in your stomach, instead of launching a mental war against it, go away, anxiety. I hate this. You can simply acknowledge it with gentle curiosity. Ah. This is anxiety. It feels like tightness, heat, fluttering. You don't have to like it. You just stop fighting it. You allow it to be there. In that allowing, something magical happens. The you that is aware of the anxiety is larger than the anxiety itself. You create a space around it. And in that space, it often begins to change, to soften, to move through you, because you are no longer giving it the fuel of your resistance. Here is a story about a gardener named Silas, who learned this lesson from the land itself. Silas had a vision for a perfect English-style flower garden, orderly rows of roses, precise hedges, not a weed in sight. He fought nature relentlessly. He poisoned weeds, battled insects, and cursed the rabbits that nibbled his seedlings. Every day was a war, and he was always losing. The garden was a source of stress, not joy. He was a tight bundle of frustration, his happiness entirely dependent on the submission of the natural world. One spring, a back injury forced him to stay indoors for nearly 2 months. He watched from his window as his ordered garden was ruined. Weeds flourished. The hedges grew shaggy. Wildflowers he'd never planted sprung up in the roses. He felt a deep grief, seeing his dream overrun. When he was finally able to limp outside, he didn't have the strength to wage war. All he could do was sit on a bench and observe. He saw bees buzzing happily on the purple clover he'd called a weed. He saw butterflies on the wild asters. A family of rabbits had made a home in the tall grass at the garden's edge, and he found himself smiling at the kids playing. The garden was alive, buzzing, teeming, not with his order, but with a vibrant, chaotic, beautiful order of its own. For the first time, he accepted the garden as it was, not as he wished it to be. He stopped seeing weeds and started seeing plants. He stopped seeing pests and started seeing creatures. He began to work with the land, not against it. He planted native species that thrived with little care. He let some areas go wild for the pollinators. He put up a small fence for the vegetables, but left offerings of greens for the rabbits at the edge. The garden transformed. It became less perfect and more abundantly, resiliently alive. It required less work and gave more beauty. Silas's tension melted away. His happiness was no longer conditional on controlling every leaf. It arose from his partnership with the life unfolding before him. He learned that peace isn't the absence of wildness or challenge, it's the end of the inner war against what is inherently uncontrollable. This brings us to a cornerstone of Buddhist ethics and wisdom, compassion, or karuna. But compassion must start at home, with yourself. We are often our own harshest critics. We speak to ourselves with a cruelty we would never direct at a friend. This inner critic is a major source of our suffering. The Buddha's path includes metta, or loving-kindness meditation, which often begins by deliberately cultivating feelings of friendliness and care toward oneself. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. This is not narcissism. It is basic sanity. You cannot offer genuine compassion to others from a cup that is empty and cracked. You must first tend to your own wounds with kindness. Think of yourself as a young child who has fallen and scraped a knee. What does that child need? Not a lecture on carelessness. Not ignored. The child needs a caring presence to pick them up, clean the wound, offer a gentle touch, a soothing word. Your own heart, when it is hurting with fear, shame, or sadness, is that child. Can you respond to yourself with that same caring presence? Can you offer yourself the simple acknowledgement, this is hard. This hurts. Self-compassion is the permission to be a human being, flawed, imperfect, and worthy of care exactly as you are. It is the foundation upon which resilience is built. When you fall, you don't add the weight of self-hatred to the fall. You offer yourself a hand up. Let me tell you about a teacher named Clara. Clara taught 5th grade, and she was beloved for her patience with her students. She had a gift for seeing the struggling child behind the misbehavior and offering gentle encouragement. Yet, in the quiet of her own home, her inner dialogue was brutal. A lesson plan that didn't go perfectly. You're a failure. A forgotten parent email. You're so irresponsible. She held herself to an impossible standard of flawless performance, and her self-talk was a relentless, shaming monologue. She was compassionate to everyone but herself. The strain began to show. She was constantly exhausted, plagued by tension headaches. One day, a particularly challenging student threw a tantrum. Clara, with superhuman patience, calmed the child, spoke softly, and helped them re-regulate. After school, as she sat at her desk drained, the familiar critic piped up, "You should have handled that sooner. You lost control of the classroom for 5 minutes. Incompetent." But this time, she heard the voice with new ears. It sounded so harsh, so cruel. A thought arose, would I ever speak to one of my students that way? The answer was a horrified no. She would have seen a child in distress and offered comfort. In that moment, she saw herself as that child, a person in distress, trying her best, needing comfort, not condemnation. She began a simple practice. Whenever she noticed the critical voice, she would consciously interrupt it and say, as if to one of her students, "It's okay. You're learning. This is hard. I'm here." She would sometimes even place a hand gently on her own heart. It felt awkward at first, silly even. But slowly, the knots inside her began to loosen. The headaches became less frequent. She found she had more authentic energy for her students, because she was no longer draining herself with a hidden civil war. Clara discovered that self-compassion wasn't self-indulgence, it was the most practical form of self-maintenance. It allowed her to be a better teacher, not a perfect one. She learned that the same gentle space she held for her students was her own birthright. Now, let's consider another story, one that illustrates how our perceptions create our reality. In a small village, 2 brothers inherited adjacent plots of land from their father. The land was rocky and sloped, difficult to farm. The first brother, Cale, looked at his plot and saw only hardship. "This is terrible land. Nothing will grow here. Our father left us a curse." He farmed with resentment, did the bare minimum, and his harvests were meager, confirming his belief. The second brother, Finn, looked at the same rocky soil and saw potential. "This land is challenging, but look, the slope means good drainage. The stones can be used for walls. Perhaps it's not for wheat, but for something else." He experimented. He built terraces with the stones. He planted hardy herbs and fruit trees that thrived in well-drained soil. He consulted with an old gardener who suggested vines for the sun-drenched slopes. Within a few years, Finn's plot was a lush, productive, and beautiful mosaic of gardens and orchards. People came to see it. Cale's plot remained barren and weedy. Cale would look over the wall and grumble, "He just got lucky. His plot must be better." One day, a traveling monk visited the village. He listened to Kale's complaints. The monk asked to see both plots. After walking them, he said to Kale, "The soil is the same. The sun is the same. The rain is the same. The only difference is the farmer. You saw rocks and planted despair. Your brother saw stones and built a foundation. You saw a slope and saw a problem. He saw a slope and saw a terrace. Your reality was created by what you chose to see and what you then refused to do." Kale was stunned into silence. He had never considered that his lens of resentment was the very thing ensuring his failure. The monk's words weren't a magic fix, but they planted a seed. The next season, Kale began, slowly and awkwardly, to clear a small section. He didn't do it with joy yet, but he did it without the constant inner commentary of complaint. And to his surprise, a few things grew. The story isn't about instant success. It's about the fundamental Buddhist truth that our mind is the forerunner of all things. Our attitude, our perception, is the primary cause of our suffering or our peace. You cannot always change the circumstances, but you can always change your relationship to them. That change begins with a single, quiet shift in perception. Let's continue. We often live with a silent assumption that our thoughts are truth. That because we think something, it must be real, important, and a direct instruction for action. The mind chatters constantly, weaving stories about the past, forecasting doom for the future, commenting on the present. Buddhism offers a crucial insight: you are not your thoughts. Thoughts are mental events. They arise, they have a certain energy, and they pass away, like clouds moving across the sky of your awareness. The problem isn't the thoughts themselves, it's our tendency to grab onto them, to believe them absolutely, to build identities and lives around them. Imagine sitting by a river, watching leaves float by on the current. Each leaf is a thought. You can simply watch them come and go. That is mindfulness. Or, you can leap into the river, frantically chasing one particular leaf, trying to grab it, analyze it, figure out where it came from and what it means. That is what we usually do. We get soaked, exhausted, and distracted from the peaceful bank of present awareness. The practice is to learn to sit on the bank. To notice the thought leaf. Ah, there's a thought about work. And let it float on by. You don't have to ignore it. You simply don't have to jump in after it. This creates a profound space between the thought and the you that is aware of it. In that space, you find freedom. You are no longer a puppet jerked around by every passing mental whim. You become the wise, calm observer of the river. Here's a story about a man named David who was a prisoner of his own thoughts. David was a brilliant theoretical physicist. His mind was a powerful tool for solving complex problems. But off the clock, that same mind turned against him. It would latch onto a casual comment from a colleague and spin it into a narrative of professional disrespect. It would take a minor household worry and project it years into the future into a full-blown catastrophe. He lived in a constant state of low-grade anxiety, his inner world a storm of what-ifs and recursive analysis. He believed if he could just think his way through the worry, he could solve it. But the thinking was the problem. His wife, seeing his suffering, gifted him a weekend at a mindfulness retreat. David went skeptically, expecting vague platitudes. The first exercise was a simple body scan, just noticing sensations from the toes to the head. David's mind rebelled. This is absurd. What data does this provide? What problem does this solve? But as he reluctantly followed the instructions, he noticed something. The tightness in his shoulders. The slight ache in his lower back. These were present-moment facts, simple sensations. They weren't stories. They just were. The pivotal moment came during a sitting meditation. The instruction was to label thoughts as thinking and return to the breath. David's mind, of course, raced. Thinking. Return to breath. My grant proposal is due. Thinking. Return to breath. What if the review is hostile? Thinking. Return to breath. I should be working right now. Thinking. And then, a space opened. For a fraction of a second, between the label, thinking, and the frantic re-engagement with the thought, there was quiet. Just the breath. In that tiny gap, David had a revelation that was more profound than any scientific discovery. I am not my thoughts. I am the one who is aware of them. The chaotic river was still there, but for the first time, he found the bank. He wasn't drowning in the current, he was sitting beside it, watching it flow. He didn't leave the retreat enlightened. He left with a tool. Back in his daily life, when the storm of catastrophic thinking would begin, he would hear the first, "What if?" and instead of following it down the rabbit hole, he would quietly say to himself, "Ah." Thinking. He would feel his feet on the floor. He would notice one breath. The thought would often lose its compulsive power. It was still a thought, but it was no longer a command. David's anxiety didn't vanish, but its tyranny over him did. He had learned to be the sky, not the weather. This leads us to another essential teaching, right effort. The Buddhist path is not about passive resignation. It requires effort, but it is a specific, wise kind of effort. It's the effort of cultivating the helpful and letting go of the unhelpful. It's like gardening. You don't just sit and hope roses grow. You prepare the soil, plant the seeds, water them, and pull the weeds. But you also understand that you cannot pull on the shoots to make them grow faster. Your effort is supportive, not forceful. It is a partnership with life. In our own minds, unhelpful states are like weeds: greed, hatred, delusion, envy, restlessness. Helpful states are like beneficial plants: generosity, kindness, wisdom, calm, concentration. Wise effort is noticing when a weed has sprouted, a surge of jealousy, a spike of anger, and gently, without hatred for the weed, loosening its grip and redirecting your attention. It is also consciously planting and watering the seeds of the beneficial, deliberately practicing gratitude, consciously offering a kind word, setting aside time for quiet reflection. Consider the story of the blacksmith and the bellows. A young apprentice blacksmith, Eris, was tasked with forging a simple iron hook. He worked with furious, frantic effort. He pumped the bellows wildly, creating a roaring, chaotic fire that burned too hot and too fast. He hammered the metal with all his strength, but his blows were uneven, driven by impatience. The iron became brittle, cracked, and was ultimately useless. He collapsed, exhausted and ashamed of his failure. The master smith, Elara, watched silently. She then took a new piece of iron. Her movements were calm, precise. She worked the bellows with a steady, rhythmic pulse, whoosh, pause, creating a deep, consistent, and intensely hot bed of coals. She heated the metal evenly until it glowed a perfect cherry red. Then she hammered it. Her strikes were not the hardest, but they were perfectly timed and placed. Tap tap tap. Turn. Tap tap tap. Each blow was an intention, not an outburst. Slowly, surely, the formless lump of iron began to take the elegant, functional shape of a hook. When she was done, she held up the two hooks, the apprentice's shattered piece and her own perfect one. "Your effort was not wrong," she said. "But it was unskillful. You confused force with power. You thought the goal was to attack the iron. The goal is to communicate with it. The fire needs breath, not a hurricane. The metal needs guidance, not punishment. Your mind was the wild bellows. To forge anything of value, you must first learn to forge a steady mind." Eris understood. He began to practice mindfulness not as a spiritual exercise, but as a foundational craft skill. He learned to steady his breath, to focus his attention, to apply effort in sustained, rhythmic waves rather than in exhausting, sporadic bursts. His next hook was not perfect, but it was whole. He learned that right effort isn't about straining harder. It's about paying closer attention and applying energy with skillful timing and direction. Now, let's explore a story about interdependence, a beautiful and central concept in Buddhism called pratitya samutpada, the understanding that all phenomena arise in dependence upon other phenomena. Nothing exists in isolation. In a bustling city, there was a famous clock tower, its four-faced clock the city's trusted timekeeper. One day, the minute hand on the south face stopped moving. The city's engineer, Ms. Reed, was called. She opened the clock face and found the issue: a single, tiny gear, no bigger than a coin, had cracked. A councilman, eager to cut costs, scoffed. "It's just one tiny gear on one face. The other three faces work. Surely we can ignore it. It's an insignificant part." Ms. Reed shook her head. She led the councilman deep into the heart of the clock tower, into a room of breathtaking complexity. Hundreds of gears, large and small, interlocked in a silent, precise dance. She pointed to a massive central gear, then traced a path through smaller and smaller gears, a chain of interdependence, until she reached the very tiny, cracked gear. "This insignificant gear," she said, "transmits the impulse from the central weight through this sequence to the mechanism that moves all 4-minute hands. It's not part of one face, it's part of the system that drives the faces. It is small, but its function is essential. Because it is broken, the entire system is slowly winding down. In an hour, all 4 clocks will stop." She replaced the tiny gear. The great clock continued its timeless work. We are like that clock tower. We think of ourselves as independent, separate faces. But we are deeply interconnected systems. Your mood affects your family, which affects their coworkers, and so on. The health of a river upstream affects the farm downstream. A kind word to a stranger can alter the course of their day, which ripples out in ways you'll never see. Your peace is not a private possession. It is a contribution to the whole. Understanding this interdependence fosters a natural sense of compassion and responsibility. It moves us from, "How do I get mine?" back to, how can we all be well? It shows us that tending to our own inner peace, skillfully working with our own gears, is not a selfish act. It is a vital repair we make to the greater whole of which we are an inseparable part. Your calmness becomes a gift to the world. Your clarity becomes a light that helps others see. Let's continue. There is a profound teaching in Buddhism about the middle way. It is the path of balance between extremes. The Buddha himself discovered this after years of practicing severe asceticism, denying the body to its limits, which brought him no closer to enlightenment, only to weakness. He then remembered a moment of simple, natural joy from his childhood, and realized that the path to freedom wasn't through punishing the body or indulging its every desire, but through a balanced, mindful presence. The middle way avoids the extreme of sensual indulgence on one side and self-mortification on the other. It is the centered path of wise moderation. In our own lives, we often swing on a pendulum between extremes. We work to the point of burnout, then collapse into lethargy. We cling tightly to relationships, then push people away in fear. We indulge in pleasures until they make us sick, then swear them off completely. The middle way invites us to step off the pendulum and find the still point in the center. It's about responding to life's needs with appropriateness, not reacting from compulsion. Imagine you are tuning a guitar string. If you turn the tuning peg too far to the right, the string is too tight, it produces a sharp, strained note and may even snap. If you turn it too far to the left, the string is too loose, it flops and produces a dull, flat thud. The sweet spot, the true note, is found in the balanced tension between the two extremes. Your life is an instrument. The middle way is the practice of tuning your actions, your speech, and your mind to find that resonant, true note of harmony. Here is a story about a chef named Marco who discovered the middle way in the most unexpected place. Marco was a culinary artist of the highest order. His restaurant was booked months in advance. He pursued flavor with the intensity of a warrior. His kitchen was a temple of extreme precision and equally extreme pressure. He would work 18-hour days, a tyrant in pursuit of perfection. Then, he would crash, consuming rich food and wine in excess to numb his exhaustion. His health suffered. His relationships frayed. He was a masterpiece of extremes. During a mandatory health leave, he was sent to a quiet coastal village to rest. Bored and restless, he wandered into the kitchen of the small inn where he was staying. The cook, an elderly woman named Ilara, was making soup. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace. She tasted the broth, added a single pinch of salt, stirred, and waited. She tasted again. A small smile. It was done. Marco, the master of complex reductions and foams, was skeptical. That's it? Just vegetables, water, salt. Ilara handed him a spoon. Taste. He did. It was the most profoundly delicious, comforting, complete thing he had ever tasted. It wasn't an explosion of flavor. It was a deep, resonant harmony. Every vegetable tasted fully of itself. The broth was clear and profound. It was balanced. How, was all he could ask. Ilara sat down. You chase the note, young man. You tighten the string until it screams, then you loosen it until it sighs. You have forgotten how to listen for the true note. This soup is not about more. It is about enough. The salt is not to make it salty, but to reveal the sweetness of the carrot. The heat is not to boil, but to coax. It is a conversation with the ingredients, not a command. Marco stayed for weeks, not as a chef, but as a kitchen helper. He learned to shell peas slowly, feeling the pop. To chop onions, noticing their layers. To wait for a simmer, not a rolling boil. He learned that resting the dough is as important as kneading it. He discovered the middle way between striving and surrendering, between effort and ease. When he returned to his restaurant, he transformed it. The menu became simpler, sourcing became sacred, the kitchen became quieter. He no longer chased Michelin stars, he cultivated nourishment. His food became legendary for a new reason: it made people feel deeply, quietly good. Marco found that perfection wasn't an extreme to be achieved, it was a balance to be found, in every chop, every simmer, every breath. The middle way saved his art, and his life. This brings us to another central concept, equanimity, or upekkha. Equanimity is the balanced, steady mind that remains unshaken by the 8 worldly winds: pleasure and pain, praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute. It is the quality of a mountain that stands firm while storms rage and sun shines upon it. It is not indifference. It is a profound, inclusive fairness of heart that meets all experience with the same calm, clear presence. We tend to be like weather vanes, spinning to face every changing wind. Someone praises us, and we soar. Someone criticizes us, and we plummet. We get a promotion, and we are ecstatic. We face a setback, and we are devastated. This constant up and down is exhausting. Equanimity is the cultivation of an inner gyroscope that keeps you upright and centered, regardless of the external conditions. How do we develop this? It starts with noticing our attachments to these winds. Notice the little thrill of pleasure when you receive a compliment, and the corresponding pinch of pain when you receive blame. See them both as passing weather. Don't cling to the pleasure, don't resist the pain. Simply acknowledge, the wind of praise is blowing, or the wind of loss is blowing. Then return to your center, to your breath, to the awareness that is aware of both the thrill and the pinch. That awareness itself is undisturbed. Let me tell you about a renowned public speaker, Sophia, who was a slave to the wind of praise. Sophia was brilliant, articulate, and in high demand. She lived for the standing ovation, the flood of congratulatory emails after a talk. Her sense of self-worth was hooked directly to her audience's approval. Inevitably, after a particularly triumphant tour, she gave a talk that landed flat. The audience was polite but tepid. The reviews were mixed. For Sophia, it was a catastrophe. She fell into a deep depression, convinced she was a fraud, her career over. A mentor, seeing her struggle, gave her a strange assignment. For the next month, he said, I want you to give one talk a week to an audience of one. A person in a nursing home, a patient in a hospital, a friend going through a hard time. No stage, no microphone, no applause. Just a conversation where you share something useful. And after each one, I want you to sit for 10 minutes and write down not how you felt, but what you noticed about them. Reluctantly, Sophia began. The first talk was to an elderly man with memory loss. She simply told him a story about her grandfather. He smiled vaguely and fell asleep. No applause. No feedback. Yet, she noticed his breathing had eased. The second was to a friend recovering from surgery. She just listened, mostly. She noticed her friend's shoulders relax. Week by week, something in her began to shift. The need for the roaring crowd, the addictive hit of praise, started to loosen its grip. She discovered a quieter, deeper satisfaction in the subtle exchange of human connection, in the mere act of offering presence. The wind of praise stopped being her sole source of fuel. When she returned to the big stage, she was different. She still delivered her talks with expertise, but she was no longer fishing for applause. She was offering a gift. If the applause came, she appreciated it and let it go. If it was quiet, she was undisturbed. She had found an inner source of validation that was not dependent on the changing winds of external opinion. Her talks gained a new power, a grounded, authentic calm that audiences felt deeply. She had learned equanimity. Now, consider a story about the power of simplicity and the danger of overcomplication, a story about a well. In a village plagued by drought, the old community well ran dry. The village council debated complex, expensive solutions, piping water from a distant river, drilling a deep aquifer well, building a massive rain catchment system. They argued for months, drawing up elaborate plans, while the people suffered. A young girl, Lila, watched her grandmother each morning take a clay pot and walk not toward the dry well, but into the forest at the edge of the village. Curious, Lila followed. Her grandmother stopped at a certain spot where the rocks were mossy. She cleared away some leaves to reveal a faint, damp depression in the earth. She placed her pot beneath a large, broad leaf that was angled like a gutter. She waited. Slowly, drop by drop, clear water condensed on the underside of the leaf from the cool, moist air of the forest and trickled into the pot. It took an hour to fill one pot. It was simple, slow, and it worked. Lila ran back to the council. There is water in the forest. My grandmother is collecting it. The engineers scoffed. Do collection? That's primitive. It's insufficient for a whole village. But Lila persisted. She showed other villagers the spot. They found others. Soon, many families were collecting water this way. It wasn't enough for luxury, but it was enough for survival. It required no complex infrastructure, just attention to the simple, existing gifts of the environment. The council's grand plans remained on paper, mired in cost and conflict. The village survived on the wisdom of simplicity. They learned that the most elegant solution is often not the most complex one, but the one that works in harmony with the present conditions, that meets the actual need without creating new problems. In our own quest for happiness, we are often like that village council. We seek complex, dramatic solutions, a new job, a new relationship, a new philosophy, a dramatic life overhaul, while ignoring the simple, present moment practices that could sustain us right now. A conscious breath, a moment of gratitude, a kind word to ourselves, a few minutes of quiet. We think we need to drill a deep new well, when a leaf is already offering us enough water to survive this day's thirst. The middle way often looks like simplicity. It is doing what is necessary and sufficient, without extra struggle or strain. It is finding the profound in the plain. Let's continue. In our journey, we must address a quiet, persistent voice that lives in the background of many minds, the voice of doubt. It whispers, "This won't work for me. I'm too far gone. My mind is too busy. I'm not spiritual enough." This doubt can be a major obstacle, not because it's true, but because we believe it and stop our investigation before it even begins. The Buddha encouraged a spirit of inquiry, of "come and see." He didn't ask for blind faith. He said, "Test these teachings against your own experience. Your own direct understanding is the final authority." Think of doubt like a thick fog over a landscape. The landscape, your potential for peace, clarity, and understanding, is still there, fully intact. The fog isn't the landscape, it's just a temporary condition that obscures it. The practice isn't to fight the fog or believe its message that nothing exists. The practice is to learn to sit patiently in the fog, to do the next simple, faithful action, like taking one mindful breath, and to trust that the sun of your own awareness will, in time, burn the fog away. You don't have to believe the path works. You just have to be willing to take one step on it, and see what happens. Here is a story about a scientist named Eris, a man who lived by doubt. Eris studied microbiology. His world was one of evidence, peer review, and reproducible results. When a period of intense stress led him to explore meditation, his dominant experience was one of frustration and skepticism. "I'm just sitting here, focusing on something as trivial as my breath, while my actual problems remain unsolved. This is unscientific nonsense." His meditation teacher listened and then said, "Good. Your doubt is honest. Let's design an experiment." She proposed a simple protocol. For 2 weeks, he would dedicate 10 minutes each morning to a single task. Counting his breaths from 1 to 10, and then starting over. His only job was to notice when his mind wandered and gently return to counting. He was to keep a lab notebook. Not of mystical experiences, but of raw data. How many times did he lose count each session? What were the predominant thoughts that pulled him away? What was his subjective stress level before and after, on a scale of 1 to 10? Eris agreed. This was a language he understood. The first week's data was messy. He lost count constantly, dozens of times per session. The intrusive thoughts were all about work, finances, and his own judgment about the exercise. The pre- and post-stress numbers barely budged. He presented the data to his teacher, almost triumphantly. "See? No significant effect." She pointed to day 7. "Look. Your lost count incidence dropped from 42 to 38. A small, but measurable, change. And your post-session stress rating, while still high, dropped from an 8 to a 7. 5 on 3 occasions. The trend is noisy, but it is not flat. Continue. Refine your observation." Grudgingly, Eris continued. In the second week, he started to notice something else in the data. The thoughts that pulled him away began to categorize themselves. Worry about future was one column. Replaying past conversation was another. He was no longer just lost in thought, he was observing the patterns of thought. This was a metacognitive shift. By the end of the 2 weeks, the number of times he lost count had halved. His post-session stress rating consistently dropped by a full point. The data was clear, the intervention had a measurable, if modest, effect on his mental clutter and subjective stress. More importantly, Eris had a personal insight that wasn't in the numbers. He realized that for 10 minutes a day, he wasn't believing his thoughts, he was categorizing them. He had created a tiny space between himself and the torrent of worry. He hadn't solved his problems, but he had changed his relationship to them. His doubt wasn't gone, but it was now directed in a useful way. What is the mechanism behind this effect? How can I observe it more closely? His spiritual practice had become a continuation of his scientific practice, a careful, honest investigation of the nature of his own mind. The fog of blanket skepticism had lifted, revealing the landscape of mindful inquiry. This leads us to a vital, and often overlooked, aspect of the path, joy, or mudita. Buddhist practice is not a grim, joyless austerity. It includes the cultivation of appreciative joy, joy in the happiness and success of others, and joy in the simple wonders of being alive. This is the antidote to envy and resentment. When we see someone else thriving, our habitual, conditioned mind might contract in comparison. Why them and not me? This contraction is a source of subtle, chronic suffering. Appreciative joy trains the heart to expand instead. How wonderful that they are happy. Their joy does not diminish mine, it adds to the total amount of light in the world. You can practice this. See a stranger laughing with a friend. Silently wish, may your happiness continue. Hear about a colleague's promotion. Instead of the inward grimace, consciously think, I'm glad for their success. It may feel artificial at first, but you are retraining a deep neural pathway from scarcity to abundance. You are reminding yourself that joy is not a finite pie where someone else's slice means less for you. Joy is a flame that can light countless candles without losing its own brightness. Let me share a story about a painter named Elena who learned this lesson in color. Elena and her friend Clara were artists in the same small city. Elena was talented but struggled financially, painting in obscurity. Clara's style suddenly caught the eye of a prominent gallery owner. Her paintings sold out, she was featured in magazines, her success was bright and undeniable. Elena felt a corrosive mix of envy and despair. Every time she saw Clara's name or work, it felt like a personal failure. She stopped visiting Clara's studio. Her own painting became forced, joyless. One gray afternoon, walking through the city in a funk, she passed the gallery showing Clara's work. She almost hurried by, but something made her stop and look in the window. One painting dominated the display, a vibrant explosion of golden sunflowers against a deep blue sky. It was undeniably magnificent, full of a raw, joyful energy that Elena herself had lost. As she stood there, a shift occurred. Instead of thinking, she did that, she simply looked. She saw the boldness of the yellow, the confidence of the brushstroke, the sheer aliveness of the image. A thought arose, clear and quiet, that is a beautiful thing. That beauty exists in the world. It was a simple appreciation, stripped of personal comparison. In that moment, the knot of envy loosened. She wasn't happy about Clara's success, but she was, for a fleeting second, honestly glad that such a painting existed. She went home and looked at her own half-finished canvas. A muted, careful landscape. She felt no urge to paint over it or make it sunflowers. Instead, she felt a sudden, fierce love for her own muted grays and greens. They were her truth right now. She picked up her brush and began to paint, not to compete with Clara's sun, but to honor her own subtle, quiet light. She painted the soft rain on the windowpane, the silvery quality of the afternoon. Elena began a private practice. Whenever she felt the pang of comparison, she would actively look for something to appreciate, in another's work, in nature, in a moment. She was training her eye and her heart to see beauty, period. Over time, her envy transformed into a broader, more generous artistic vision. Her own work found its unique voice, and interestingly, it began to sell. She learned that another's brilliance doesn't dim your own light, it can, if you allow it, remind you to turn your own on. Now, let's explore a concept through a story about effort and grace, about doing and non-doing. It's the story of the archery student. A young man, Kenji, sought out a famed archery master, wanting to learn the secret of the perfect shot. The master gave him a bow and said, "Hit the center of the target." Kenji strained, his muscles tight, his focus fierce. He shot. The arrow veered wildly into the straw bales beside the target. For weeks, he practiced with grim determination. He analyzed his stance, his grip, his release. He shot hundreds of arrows. His shots became more consistent, but they clustered around the outer rings of the target. The center seemed repelled by his effort. Frustrated, he cried, "Master, I am doing everything I can think of. What am I doing wrong?" The master took the bow. "You are doing everything. That is the problem. The perfect shot does not come from you doing it. It comes through you when you get out of the way." The master knocked an arrow. His posture was relaxed, almost casual. He didn't seem to aim. He simply drew the bowstring, paused for a breath, and released. Whip. The arrow struck the exact center with a soft, final sound. "How?" Kenji breathed. "The target is not there," the master said, pointing to the distant bullseye. "The target is here." He pointed to Kenji's heart. "And here." He pointed to the connection between the archer's hand and the bow. "And here." He pointed to the space between breaths. "You are trying to force the arrow to the target with your will. You must instead become so aligned, body, breath, and mind so unified and relaxed, that the shot happens by itself. Your only job is to create the conditions for grace to enter. Stop trying to shoot the arrow. Let the arrow shoot itself." This is a profound metaphor for living. We spend so much energy trying to make things happen, to force happiness, to control outcomes, to achieve peace through sheer effort. The Buddhist path involves wise effort, yes, but it culminates in a kind of surrender, a letting go into the flow of things. It is the balance between preparing the ground with diligence and then trusting the seed to grow in its own time. It's doing your part, then releasing the white-knuckled grip on the result. The perfect shot, the moment of peace, the flash of insight, they often come not when we are straining hardest, but in the quiet space after we have released the strain. Kenji's practice changed. He spent less time shooting arrows and more time simply holding the bow, feeling its balance. He practiced breathing until his breath was smooth as silk. He stood before the target and just looked, until the separation between seer and target softened. Months later, during a routine practice, he drew the bowstring. He felt his body as a single, aligned instrument. There was no Kenji trying to hit anything. There was just the breath, the release, and the thwack of the arrow finding the center. He hadn't done it. It had happened. And in that moment, he understood effort and grace as two wings of the same bird. Let's continue. We often speak of forgiveness as something we grant to others. Yet, one of the most profound and challenging acts of forgiveness is the one we must offer to ourselves. We carry the memory of our past mistakes, our failures, the times we spoke harshly, acted selfishly, or fell short of our own values. These memories can become like stones in a backpack, growing heavier with each passing year. The Buddhist path of compassion explicitly includes ourselves. To hold on to self-blame and regret is to continue the suffering of the original mistake. Forgiveness is not saying what you did was okay. It is saying that your continued suffering over it is not necessary. It is the act of putting down the stone. Think of it as tending to an old wound. If you have a wound on your arm, you clean it, you stitch it, you care for it. You don't, day after day, repeatedly stab yourself in the same spot. Yet, with our mental and emotional wounds, that is often what we do. We replay the memory, we rehearse the shame, we stab at the old injury. Self-forgiveness is the moment you decide to stop stabbing. It is the application of the medicine of understanding to the wound. I was in pain then. I was confused. I acted from ignorance, not malice. I see that now. I am learning. This is not an excuse. It is a diagnosis that allows healing to begin. Here is a story about a man named Thomas, who carried a single, heavy stone for 20 years. As a young man, Thomas had a fierce argument with his father. Harsh words were exchanged, the kind that leave permanent scratches on the heart. The last thing Thomas shouted as he slammed the door was, "I wish I'd never been born your son." He left town that night and, out of pride and shame, never returned. A year later, his father died suddenly. The words became a cage. Thomas carried them everywhere, the last, terrible message his father ever heard from him. He defined himself as the son who failed at the end. He built a successful life, but it felt like a stage set built over a hole. He was irritable, prone to sudden sadness, and could not truly receive love, feeling unworthy of it. In his mid-40s, worn down by the silent weight, he finally sought counsel. He told the story, his voice thick with a grief that had never aged. The counselor listened and then asked a simple question. "Thomas, if your own son, at age 19, in a moment of blind rage, said those exact words to you, and then you died before you could reconcile, what would you want for him? Would you want him to carry those words as his identity for the next 50 years? Would you want him to build his life on that single moment of pain?" Thomas was stunned. The question had never occurred to him. He saw instantly the image of his own, now grown son, and his heart flooded with a father's unconditional love. "No," he whispered, tears finally coming. "No, I'd want him to forgive himself. I'd want him to remember the thousands of good days, not the one bad moment. I'd want him to be free." Then, the counselor said gently, "You must grant your father the same wish. You must believe he loved you more than that moment. And you must grant yourself the forgiveness your father would have already given." It was not an instant fix. But it was a key turning in a locked door. Thomas began a ritual. He wrote the terrible sentence on a piece of paper. Then, on another, he wrote what he believed his father's true, final wish for him would have been, "Be at peace, my son." He burned the first paper, letting the ash scatter. He kept the second in his wallet. He started speaking to his father in his mind, not with apologies, but with simple news of his life. "Dad, I planted an oak tree today." The stone in his backpack began, slowly, to dissolve. He didn't forget his mistake, but he finally stopped punishing himself for it. The wound could finally close. This story touches on another deep teaching, the importance of intention, or satana. The Buddha said that intention is karma. It's the seed from which actions, speech, and further thoughts grow. We often judge ourselves and others by outcomes, by results. But the spiritual perspective looks to the root, the intention behind the action. Was it rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion? Or was it rooted in generosity, kindness, and wisdom? A good outcome born from a selfish intention is not truly wholesome. A bad outcome that came from a sincere, kind intention is not a failure of the heart. Cultivating awareness of your intentions is a powerful practice. Before you speak, pause and check, what is my aim here? To connect? To be right? To hurt? To help? Before you act, ask, is this coming from love or from fear? This doesn't guarantee perfect outcomes. The world is complex, but it ensures you are planting seeds for a future you actually want to live in. You are tending the garden of your mind at its very root. Consider the tale of the two messengers. In a kingdom at war, the king needed to send a critical message to his general at the front. He entrusted it to two identical scrolls, to be carried by two different riders, taking two different routes, in case one was captured. The first rider, Eris, was motivated by pride and desire for reward. He thought, if I deliver this first, the king will make me a noble. I will be famous. He rode with fierce, reckless speed, pushing his horse to exhaustion, viewing every forest path as an obstacle to his glory. The second rider, Ben, was motivated by duty and care for the kingdom. He thought, the lives of the soldiers depend on this message arriving. The kingdom's safety rests on it. He rode with steady, determined care, pacing his horse, choosing the safest path, his mind on the message's importance, not his own. Eris's horse, pushed too hard, stumbled and broke a leg in a ravine. Eris was stranded, the message undelivered. Ben, riding steadily, arrived at the camp just in time for the general to adjust his strategy and save the army. On the surface, both men had the same task, deliver the scroll. One failed, one succeeded. But the king, when he heard the reports, honored Ben and merely found a new horse for Eris. His advisors were puzzled. But sire, both had equal intention to deliver it. The king shook his head. No. Eris intended to deliver it for himself. Ben intended to deliver it for us all. The intention shaped the journey. Eris saw only his prize, so he saw the path as an enemy to be conquered, and he fell. Ben saw the kingdom, so he saw the path as a partner to be respected, and he prevailed. The outcome was born from the intention long before the horse took its first step. In your own life, you are both the king and the messenger. You set the intention, the why, for your actions. That intention will shape the quality of your journey, regardless of the visible outcome. Acting from kindness creates an inner experience of kindness, even if the world doesn't respond as you hope. Acting from fear creates an inner experience of fear, even if you succeed. By choosing your intentions wisely, you choose the climate of your own heart. Now, let's explore a story that weaves together impermanence, non-attachment, and the beauty of the present moment. It's the story of the ice sculptor. In a northern city, there was a winter festival famous for its ice sculpture competition. The greatest sculptor was an artist named Kaito. His works were breathtaking: crystalline dragons, palaces of ice, goddesses so detailed they seemed to breathe cold air. People would flock to see them, knowing they were masterpieces, and knowing they were doomed. For Kaito's process was unique. While other sculptors worked under tents to slow the melting, Kaito worked in the open air. He would begin as soon as the block of ice was set in the town square. He worked through the day, and if the sun was out and the sculpture began to melt even as he carved, he would incorporate the melting into the design. A dragon's wing might drip, so he would thin it further, making it look like gossamer. A palace wall might soften, so he would reshape it into a flowing curtain. The judges and the public would watch, mesmerized. His sculptures were never finished, in a traditional sense. They were in a constant state of becoming and dissolving. By the third day, they would often be abstract, beautiful ghosts of their original form. And by the week's end, they would be gone, puddles in the square. One year, a rich patron offered Kaito a fortune. "Your work is genius. Let me build you a permanent refrigerated gallery. You can create your sculptures, and they will last forever. You will be immortal." Kaito smiled and declined. "Thank you," he said, "but you misunderstand. The beauty is not in the lasting. The beauty is in the fleeting. The beauty is in the dance between the knife and the melt, between my intention and the sun's intention. If it lasted forever, it would become a thing, a possession. It would lose its life. Its life is its disappearance." People don't come to see a sculpture. They come to see a moment of beauty having a conversation with time. They come to remember that they, too, are having that same conversation. Kaito understood the deepest teaching. He was not attached to the form. He was in love with the process of creation and release. He didn't mourn the puddle, he saw it as the sculpture's final, perfect form. His art was a direct teaching on impermanence and non-attachment, and in embracing that truth fully, he created things of heartbreaking, momentary beauty that people never forgot. We are all ice sculptors. Our relationships, our careers, our health, our very bodies, they are all beautiful, temporary forms, shaped by our actions and by the warmth of time. We can spend our energy fighting the melt, building refrigerated galleries of control and fear. Or, we can learn from Kaito. We can pick up our tools and engage lovingly with the form we have today, knowing it is changing even as we touch it. We can appreciate the way the light shines through it now. We can find a profound, bittersweet joy in the very fact that it won't last, because that makes this moment, this curve of ice, this breath, infinitely precious. Let's conclude our journey. We have walked through many gardens of understanding, mindfulness, impermanence, non-attachment, compassion, the middle way. Now, we arrive at a quiet, open field. This is the space of integration. It's not about adding one more concept, but about letting all that we've explored settle into the simplicity of being. The ultimate wisdom in Buddhism is not a complicated philosophy. It is a return to a natural state that was never lost, only overlooked. It is the understanding that nirvana, peace, freedom, it is not somewhere else. It is the nature of this very mind when it is free from grasping and aversion. It is the water when the mud settles. It is the sky when the clouds part. Your practice, your life, is not about becoming a better person. It is about uncovering the person you already are, beneath the layers of conditioning, story, and fear. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You need only to be recognized. This recognition happens in the pause. In the space between thoughts. In the gentle return to the breath. In the soft, hello, you offer to a feeling of sadness without trying to change it. It is in these ordinary moments that the extraordinary truth of your being reveals itself. Imagine you have been living in a house for years, believing it to be small, dark, and confining. You've spent your time painting the walls, rearranging the furniture, complaining about the size. Then, one day, you discover a hidden lever. You pull it, and entire walls swing open, revealing that your house is not a closed structure at all, but a wide, open pavilion with no walls, situated on a breathtaking mountain vista. The space, the view, the freedom, it was always there. You were just focusing on the few interior walls you thought defined your world. The lever is mindfulness. The walls are your beliefs, your identifications, your stories. The open pavilion is your true nature. Let me offer one final, original story. A synthesis of all we've discussed. There was a master mapmaker named Alara, the last in a long line of cartographers who served a once great kingdom. The kingdom had long since faded, its borders forgotten, but Alara's family tradition held that the ultimate map, the map of the true kingdom, existed. It was said to show not just geography, but the location of peace itself. Alara spent her life searching for this map. She traveled to dusty archives, decoded crumbling scrolls, and interviewed the last living elders. She drew countless maps based on fragments of legend, each more elaborate than the last, layering speculation upon guesswork. Her walls were covered in these maps, a labyrinth of ink and parchment. Yet, the true kingdom, the feeling of peace it promised, remained elusive. She grew weary, her eyes strained, her heart heavy with the futility of the search. One summer, a great drought struck the land. The river that ran by Alara's workshop dwindled to a trickle. Concerned for the village downstream, she decided to walk the river's ancient, dry bed to its source high in the mountains, to see what was blocking the water. It was hard, practical work, a relief from the mental puzzle of her maps. For days, she walked the parbed stones, the cracked mud. She wasn't thinking of maps or kingdoms. She was noticing where the shade was, where the last pockets of moisture gathered. Her mind grew quiet, attentive to the simple task of walking and looking. On the third day, she reached the high mountain cirque that was the river's source. She expected a landslide, a fallen tree. Instead, she found a scene of profound stillness. A perfect, clear alpine lake lay under the open sky, mirroring the clouds and peaks. The drought had not touched it here. The problem, she realized, was not at the source. The problem was somewhere down the long, winding channel she had just walked, a channel cluttered with debris, split into futile gullies by generations of misuse. As she sat by the still water, exhausted, a realization washed over her with the simplicity of the reflected light on the lake's surface. She had been mapping the channel her whole life, the twisted paths of history, legend, and speculation. But the source, the clear, still, abundant water, was not on any parchment. It was here. It had always been here. The true kingdom wasn't a place on a map. It was the quality of this water. Peace wasn't a location to be found in the past, it was the nature of the source, available whenever the channel was cleared. She didn't need to draw a new map. She needed to become a cleaner of channels. Elara returned to her village a different person. She put her maps away. She began to organize the community to clear the riverbed, to remove the debris that blocked the flow. The work was tangible, muddy, and immediate. As the channel cleared, water began to flow again to the fields below. The village revived. People came to her and said, "You have saved us. You must have found the great map." Elara would smile and point to the flowing river. "The map was the obstacle," she would say. "The truth is the water. My job is not to chart the kingdom, but to help clear the path so the kingdom's water can flow to where it is needed." In her old age, when asked for wisdom, she would say only this: "Don't look for the map. Feel for the flow. Your own heart is the source. Your thoughts, your actions, your words, these are the channel. Keep the channel clear of the debris of old anger, fear, and clinging. Then, what you are will flow naturally into the world, and you will know the true kingdom was never lost. It is what remains when the searching stops." This is our final point. The teachings, the stories, the principles, they are not the map. They are tools for clearing your channel. Your channel is your attention, your intention, your capacity for presence. The debris is your attachment to past and future, your identification with thought, your resistance to what is. The source, the clear, still, intelligent, loving awareness, is already within you. It is not something you attain. It is something you allow. You allow it by ceasing to clutter the channel. So, as we end our time together, I invite you to a very simple practice. For just the next few minutes, let everything be as it is. You don't have to clear the channel. Just notice what's in it. Notice a thought. Say, "Thought." Notice a sound. Say, "Sound." Notice a sensation in the body. Sensation. Don't follow them. Don't push them away. Just name them softly and let them drift by, like leaves on the river of your awareness. Your only job is to be the gentle, kind noticer. In this noticing, you are not building anything. You are not achieving anything. You are simply coming to rest in the awareness that is doing the noticing. And that awareness is clear. It is still. It is peaceful. It is the source. It has been here all along. You are that. You have always been that. In the moments when you forget, when the channel seems clogged with the debris of life's challenges, remember Elara. Don't search for a better map. Just pick up one piece of debris. Take one mindful breath. Offer one kind word to yourself. That is how the channel clears. That is how the water of your own true nature begins to flow again. Thank you for sharing this long and quiet journey in Monk's Temple. May the peace you have touched here ripple out into all your moments. May you be gentle with yourself. May you remember the source. May you live from that knowing. Go in peace.